let's go ahead and get started. So this particular session is about using all three of Microsoft clouds to gain customer insights. Mark Nagao and I will be going ahead and presenting this session today. So let's start off with what we're planning on covering here. We'll do some quick introductions for Mark and myself. We'll define what those three clouds are and kind of what to expect out of them. Then we've actually got kind of a problem that is, kind of one that a lot of organizations or a lot of places are facing right now. And we're going to go ahead and how we're going to use the three clouds to solve that problem. And we'll lay out kind of a business case, if you will. And then we'll go into a demo, and we've got a kind of a demo of how we can use the three Microsoft clouds to go ahead and solve this business problem. And what that's going to give us is an ability to go ahead and solve problems and how they can all interact with each other. All right, so my name is David Broussard. I'm a principal consultant with Catapult Systems, and my role at Catapult is as an M365 evangelist, and that means I get to go around and preach the gospel of Microsoft in the cloud. And what that really means is that I actually help organizations like yours to be able to leverage Microsoft Cloud technology to achieve your business goals. And you can follow me on Twitter at dbrusa, Facebook at dbrusa, LinkedIn dbrusa. You can even email me dbrusa@catapultsystems.com. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, thanks, David. Hi, I'm Mark Nagao. I'm a senior lead consultant with Catapult Systems, focusing primarily in Dynamics and Power Platform. I'm the practice technical lead, and so kind of what I do is, besides working on implementations and doing enhancements and delivery like that, I also provide oversight for other projects to just help make sure that we're delivering a consistent level of excellence and that the customers are always pleased.
Yep, and you're making me look bad by having that tie on, man. I would have, had I known, I would have gone and gotten my tie as well.
I'm gonna say this is the first time I've worn a tie in a while. It's pretty funny.
Well, there we go. All right. So let's start with kind of an overview of what are the three clouds, okay? And so there are three Microsoft clouds, and really they're Azure, Dynamics, and M365. And if you think about it, really Azure is the container that holds everything else. Everything in Dynamics, everything in M365 runs inside of Azure. And Azure provides that foundational capability to us. I mean, it's giving us things like identity management. It's providing databases and blob storage and application hosting and cognitive services to leverage AI and infrastructure as a service. And Microsoft leverages those things in Azure to build their solutions, Dynamics Online and M365. And I'll cover like M365 here, and then Mark, I'll give you to talk about Dynamics. M365 is our core business workloads. It's the core Microsoft Office suite. So we're talking about email, we're talking about files and lists in SharePoint and OneDrive. We're talking about communications, which used to be Skype for Business and now is Microsoft Teams. That's that IM telephony communications. And it's also a whole bunch of other solutions that Microsoft has built really in Azure and is deploying using the M365 cloud as its own foundation. Things like Planner, Stream, Sway, Forms, a whole bunch of these applications that exist out there. And Mark, why don't you talk a little bit about what Dynamics provides inside the clouds?
Oh, certainly. Thank you. And so with Dynamics, the traditional thought and use for it was as a sales experience from lead generation and capture to qualification to opportunities. And then from there, you can go all the way through the sales process itself. And Dynamics has always leveraged Azure or Active Directory on premise in previous versions. And now with Azure Active Directory, you now have this seamless login for, the one identity that you have as a person, and you being able to access all of the different components, all of the different pieces of that Microsoft has to offer. And so Dynamics itself, a lot of the data lives within Azure in a lot of different forms. It could be in just in like, I know David's going to get into this in a little bit, but there's a lot of different ways that um, the data can actually be stored in Azure, and how Dynamics and Power Platform, how they now have, they help the customer kind of put the data through a different lens so that
Mhm.
you can see what's pertinent to you in order to be most efficient, because there's just so much data and you need to get to the right data quickly.
Yeah, and if you think about it on premise, right, really everything that's in Microsoft 365 used to run on premise. We used to run Exchange on premise and SharePoint on premise, and if it was a SharePoint farm, as an example, you had servers and you had SharePoint servers and you had SQL servers, and the same thing was true for Dynamics, right? You had Dynamics application servers and then you had SQL servers on the back end. Well, now we don't have any of that stuff because all that stuff is handled by Microsoft up in the Azure cloud.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. So that kind of explains where we are with this whole concept of the three clouds, right? Let's go to the next thing and let's lay out a kind of a problem that talks about the interactivity between these three clouds when we're actually solving a business problem. So we're going to lay out kind of a business problem that's one that's I've noticed, where I live down here near San Antonio, Texas, where we're trying to schedule people to get COVID-19 vaccines, right? And if you think about this, so the state of Texas or any state needs to schedule people to come in and get their COVID-19 vaccinations, right? Well, we can use Microsoft 365 to handle the communication and collaboration around doing all of this work, right? There's a lot of things that for scheduling these that really is strictly communication and collaboration. A lot of unstructured data, a lot of conversations, a lot of meetings like the meeting we're having right here. And that's exactly what M365 is really all about, okay? At the same time, we want to use for structured data, we would want to use Dynamics and Azure to handle the back-end logistics of these vaccines and events. Think of it, and we'll do, in our demonstration, we'll talk about having a inventory management system where we can actually track assets as they move around and are acquired and moved around inside of our organization. And that will enable us to go ahead and say, okay, we've acquired some of this asset and we need to have it delivered to a certain location. And that's great for the people that are inside of CRM, but we can also tie that into what's actually happening inside of Microsoft Teams. And we'll kind of show that when we get to our demo and things like that. Okay. All right, so let's talk then about how all of this then comes together, and then we'll hop into the demo, okay? So I took that first drawing of the three Microsoft clouds and I've kind of replicated it here. And I want to kind of show this a slightly different way and talk about some of the components and how all of this would work for us. So once again, everything's happening inside of Azure, right? So whether it's happening inside of Dynamics or M365, it's really Azure that's providing the platform to run everything. And so it's our outer box. And if we think about it, Azure AD, over there, that Azure AD box, that is, the core of identity. We want people to be able to log in with the exact same corporate login that their organizational login that they're using all the time, right? We don't need them to have a different login. They'll use the same one, right? And Microsoft takes care of that integration perfectly. Everything in Microsoft 365, everything Dynamics is designed to work directly against Azure AD. Now, we also from Azure get world-class security through enterprise mobility and security, right? And so Microsoft is first off, because Microsoft is running this stuff as the services in the cloud, they're providing the first layer of security and reliability and making sure that the systems are up, making sure that DDoS attacks aren't happening, making sure that all the patches are in place, all the anything that starts from a hacking standpoint, they're patching and resolving immediately, right? But there's also additional levels of security that Azure provides. Things like if I'm working with documents that might contain HIPAA information, and we're talking about a COVID shot clinic, right? Or we're talking about documents that might contain PII or intellectual property, I can encrypt those using sensitivity labels, so that even if as they move around inside my organization or even leave my organization, only the appropriate people have access to those particular documents, right? We can also use DLP policies to make sure that that information isn't leaving our organization. And one of the neat things that Microsoft is now doing with their DLP policies and their sensitivity labeling, especially DLP policies, they're extending those into the Azure file storage parts and Azure database portions, where it was originally just inside of M365. It's now pushing into Azure SQL, it's pushing into Azure Blob Storage, and even down to your Windows 10 desktops. Okay, so that Azure security is really helping us out. And of course, Azure is providing the basic web applications and Azure SQL that we can store data in a long-term basis. So Mark, why don't you talk about the components that are going to be inside of Dynamics 365 inside of our demo?
Sure. And so with Dynamics itself, that's been a kind of a that was the specific term for an offering from Microsoft that used to be based around the traditional sales process, and now in the modern way that Dynamics has been implemented, it really is. There's the fundamental layer of the Dataverse where the all of the data actually just lives. And so, what's really cool about the Dataverse is that you can have um, traditional tables and columns and rows just like you would in SQL Server, but you can also have that with a collaboration of other data sources. If you're pulling from Excel, directly from SharePoint, you could be actually pulling from other places and other things like Salesforce. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can get the data into the Dataverse. And so now that you have all of the data, just this one truth of the data, how is it that you access it? And there's so much data, and not all of it is actually relevant to all people. And so that's what's really cool about how the way that they're layering the different pieces of software. And so you have the Dataverse, and then on top of that you have Power Apps. And so with that, Dynamics is a version of Power Apps where they have pre-built-in functionality if your organization might need it. And so some of the common Dynamics modules, there's the sales, there's customer engagement where you might, or customer service where you might uh, need to do something like case management or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's finance and operation, there's field service where you're actually getting resources and seeing the capacity of them and whether or not you might need to schedule them. That's something that you could probably work through in some sort of scenario like we're working as well. And but if you're doing something that hasn't been pre-built, you can just build it yourself and build it in a Power App. And so with the Power App itself, you dictate the, the layout of the screen, what entities are even exposed, and then you can connect it to uh, other Dynamics instances or other pieces of software in M365. Like we're going to show that we've done a Power Automate where we're actually having a record in Dynamics affect teams. And so we're going to see that in a second.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that that whole concept of the Dataverse, Mark. I've always thought of it as kind of like, it's almost like an enterprise service bus in a way, right? Because it's a persistent cloud storage of entities that can be related to each other, right? But I don't have to build a SQL database. I don't have to write stored procedures to pull data in and out. I can pull data from, as you pointed out, I could pull data from Dynamics. I could pull data from SQL, either in Azure or on premise. I could pull it from an Excel table. I could pull it from SharePoint lists, right? Lots of different places I could pull data, or even Azure AD, and composite it together into an entity. And then, as you said, yeah, now I can start building Power Apps against it, or I can automate it with flows and in Power Automate, or do reports against it using Power BI. And then from an M365 standpoint, right, We're going to talk about task management. So, because managing an event requires a lot of tasks. And while, yeah, I mean, theoretically, we could do all that task management inside of Dynamics, that's not necessarily Dynamics' forte unless that task something that happens every single time, right? Following a checklist, that makes sense. That's perfect. That's a case management concept inside of Dynamics, right? But if we're talking about something that's an ad hoc, I don't know what those tasks are as they pop up. It makes a lot of sense to do that inside of Microsoft 365. And we're going to have a lot of communications, whether it's emails, whether it's IMs and chats. And of course, we're going to collaborate on a lot of different files as well. And then all of that is inside of Microsoft 365, and we'll relate it to Dynamics where we need to. But it's going to give us that ability to throw together a solution pretty quickly. Okay. All right. So enough of all of this fun introduction stuff. Let's go ahead and hop into our actual demo here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and share my desktop with you guys. Let's see, I got to make sure I share the right desktop. There we go. And here is, we're going to start inside of Microsoft Teams here, okay? And so as we sit here inside of Microsoft Teams, once again, our idea here is that our organization, in this case, a state, is trying to put together a series of COVID shot clinics. And so what I've done is I've created a team called the COVID shot clinic, right? And this is actually based on a team template that Microsoft provides that is about event management. And it has a series of things that it automatically adds in for us inside of this particular team. Obviously, I've got a general communications tab where I can have conversations. And you can see I've actually got a daily stand-up meeting scheduled every day at 8 o'clock, regardless of a day of the week, because we're meeting on weekends. This is a 7-day-a-week kind of thing. We've got the ability to go out and actually have a meeting every 8 o'clock in the morning, and the members of this team will all be able to join this meeting. And as they actually are part of this meeting, everything that happens that's part of that meeting is going to be stored right here in this general channel. So you can see, as an example, I had one yesterday that lasted 15 seconds, right? Pretty quick. But the idea here is that if I go in there and say, hey, I'm going to be on channel 4 this AM and miss the meeting, right? What's cool about this is as I post these things, everybody else is going to be able to see them, and it's tied back to that day, that meeting stand up. So when somebody joins that meeting, they're going to see that I actually posted that, and they're going to go, oh, okay, we don't need to know where David is. We know he's on channel 4 this morning and stuff like that. Okay. In addition to this, you'll notice that we've also got an ability to kind of have a generic notes area, right? And this general notes, this is just one note, right? But I've got an initial plan out here. I put in my attendees. What is our purpose? I identified some quick to-dos. I took these notes while I was in an actual meeting, okay? And that's pretty powerful. Some other things that we have to do, obviously, right, is we have to think about things like, well, what about our budget, right? And when we think about this from a budget standpoint, well, I say, okay, I've got a new budget workbook. I've created some things by cities. I can go ahead and upload and attach that file directly here to this particular comment just by going down here and hitting the attach button, right? And you can see here it is, and anybody can come in here and just click on this. Or if they want to, they can go ahead and edit it right here in Teams. They can open it up in the desktop app. We can even go down here and say, hey, I want to make this a tab. And what this is going to do is it's going to go out over here and it's going to say, oh, here we go. Here's this COVID shot clinic, and you can see I've got it laid out by the different cities down below, and you can kind of go ahead and see, oh, what is, how much money have I allocated to this particular city? What was my actual allocations? What are my projected costs and actual costs? I can actually look at some of those things inside of here. And what's neat about this is I don't even have to go looking for that document anymore. I can go and update this information right here. This is part of that whole collaborative process inside of here, okay? Now, another thing that we have to think about is our whole marketing and PR aspect, right? And I would normally expect there to be a lot of conversations in here. I didn't have time to put in a whole bunch of them. But as I go over here to the files section, you can see I've got a number of different files that people are actually working through, right? So I've got this concept of statewide press release, right? And I've got regional press releases and media buy schedules that we've put inside of here so that people can actually go in, including interview talking points, right? So that if somebody's going to be on a TV show or be interviewed on the radio or something, they can go and make sure they've got their talking points and make sure that they know what they're going to be saying to the press. But I can also go down here and start to put together my press releases and how they're going to go out. And what I've done here is I've just gotten a template inside of here, right? And say, okay, I need this thing to be filled out. Okay. And so to do that, what I can actually do is I can actually go in here and say, well, I actually want this to be filled out by specific people inside my organization. And so what I can do is there's a couple of ways I can do it, right? I could have sent an email to them, right? I could send an email to Mark and say, hey, Mark, I need you to fill this thing out, right? And given him a link to the document, that would have worked. I could also have, @mentioned Mark inside of there. That's this whole concept of a conversation, right? Where I can go down here and I can just type the @ key and it's going to go out there and show me, hey, who's inside of here? And I can say, hey, Mark, can you start work on this? Okay. And I can't type, sorry, I'm so happy that I work in computers and we have spell checks now for this kind of stuff, right? But now what happens is Mark is actually going to get an activity pop sent to him. So he's going to get a little indicator over here that says that I've actually given him a task to do, or mentioned him. He can come in here and say, oh, the statewide press release, and he can go right to this document. But to take that another step even further, right, inside of my document, I could even come down over here and say, I really need to go down to this particular section right here, and I can actually add a comment. And what's cool about this is I can actually go down here and I can say, oops, don't I have you in there, Mark?
I should be in there.
There you are. There you are. Okay. I can actually go out there and say, Mark, we need this for all cities in the state. Okay. And what's cool about this is I'm actually going to put this comment inside of the document. And Mark will get an email, right, that lets him know that I mentioned him inside this document. Okay. And what I can do is I can assign this comment to Mark. Now, when I post this, what you're going to see is what's cool about this is the comment has now been assigned to Mark. When Mark comes into this document, he's going to be able to very quickly look and see, oh, look, here's a comment and I'm being asked to do something right here. Okay, so that's actually pretty cool as well. There's other things that I can do with these comments as well that I actually really like too, which is if I go over here and I do Pontus, right, one of our other coworkers, can you help here? Okay. When I assign this, when I do this to him, and I forgot, this is a public team, so everybody in the organization has rights to this particular document. If Pontus didn't have rights to this document, it would have gone ahead and told me, do you want to grant it to him right now? And so transparently, I'm able to go ahead and share that information. This is a really key way that we can drive that collaboration inside the three clouds inside of Microsoft, okay? So that's a way that we can work through this entire process. And as we're doing this, right, we've started to identify that there's certain tasks that we're going to have to actually work on. And you can see I've actually got this thing called shot clinic tasks up here. These are the logistics tasks and the communications tasks that we've already started to identify that I need to be able to go out and work on. Now, I've actually opened this up in a whole nother window inside of Microsoft Planner, so it's a little bit easier to see here. Although I say easier to see, I need to zoom this in a little bit. Let me zoom this up to 125. That makes it a little bit simpler for you guys to see. And you can see I've got a number of things I've got to do. I've got to identify the clinic location, right? We're going to be doing 10 to 4 at all these different locations. And I need them by certain days to again identify these clinic locations, okay? And I've got them coded by the different cities, which means if I really want to, I can go over here and say, you know what? I actually just want to look at the stuff for Pierre, okay? And so now it's showing me, okay, here we go. I've got this one and this one are the two. Oh, look, this one's late over here. I need to get some injection supplies and PPE and stuff like that for the clinic. So this is another aspect of this that's enabling us to go ahead and look at these things. Now, when I come back over here, you'll notice, oh, I've got a message in my logistics wing, right? So I'm going to click on my logistics, and you're going to see, oh wait, Mark has posted via Flow, right? That's part of Dynamics, right? That we've gotten 5,000 COVID shots that Pfizer first dosed, and they've been located at Pier. Okay, so that's really cool, because what's happened is there is an inventory management system we have over here. Okay, and what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to go up here to the dashboard, right? And we're going to take a look at the asset inventory. Okay, so this asset inventory inside of this entire inventory management system has been written inside the Dynamics cloud, right? It is using the Common Data Service, or Dataverse, as we call it now. Behind the scenes, that means it's going to be persisting its data into Azure, right? It can be pulling information from lots of different places: Azure SQL, SharePoint, other cloud services, pretty much any place, right? And this is going out and identifying for us a lot of content and information that we've got out of there. For example, I can get a nice little bar report that shows me what I've got in these different locations. And as I look at these, I can say, hey, you know what? Well, what kind of things am I looking for inside of this particular area? And I can go out there and say, let's see, what's the one that I want here? I want the one that is it's asset type, right? There we go. I can drill into asset type, and I can say, well, what kind of chart do I want to see that as? I guess I'll go ahead and choose a pie chart. And now I've drilled into the Pier location, and I can see what are my assets by these different pieces, right? And I can see my asset type count across these different locations, right? So what's really awesome about this from a standpoint, from an end user standpoint, right, and from a development standpoint, and Mark, I know you can talk a lot more about this, but let me get my sum up, and I'll give you some more detail, right? Is that, to actually develop this didn't require us to go out and create SQL databases, and it didn't require us to create the tables of the DDL and then create SQL stored procs and then create a data access layer and all that stuff. We simply went into the Dataverse, identified these assets, and some of these you were using were already pre-built, weren't they, Mark? These assets, a lot of them? Yeah, there's a lot of
right.
Pre-built assets. And then you can start to put that together. And Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you developed this particular application?
Sure. And so with this, we were kind of coming up with a scenario where it would be pretty relevant and applicable, where you could also kind of do some cool stuff. And so when we're going through this inventory management system, you have to start out with the actual the different types of the different assets. So if you could just
Mhm.
drive down to on the left hand at the bottom,
Mhm.
down to
Asset
asset
types?
types. Yep.
Sure.
And so we just kind of envisioned, maybe there's some different types of assets that you might want to define. Um, and then from here, you want to actually enter in maybe different types of assets. And if you could just scroll back up to assets,
Mhm.
I want to pop out another chart. So if you do show chart in the top ribbon,
Yep.
change the active assets to, I think, active pharmaceuticals,
Mhm.
and then change the chart right below it to, I think it's just called name by name. And yes, the very
Yeah, there you
last
go.
one right
Name by
there.
name. Sorry.
Yeah. And so that sounds good. And so as you can see, you know, you, what David had driven into before was, okay, how many things are listed at this particular location? Okay, now we're there. What different types of assets are at that location? And then
Mhm.
now you can even drill down further if you wanted to into something like, what are the different types of pharmaceuticals, which is just one of those particular assets. What are those different types? And so we just did a pretty simple chart that was just based off of name, and you can see that there's like 5 or 6 different types here.
Mhm.
There's like tetanus shots, some MMR, a couple different types of COVID,
Yep.
part
One
one,
and
part
two,
two.
and flu vaccines, the whole nine yards. It's great stuff.
And so you
And
can
so once
break this
again,
down easily.
you
Yeah.
didn't actually have to build the database behind this, right? You just went into and used pre-existing assets inside the Dataverse. Is that right?
So in this, I guess in this scenario, so I use the accounts and the contacts that were
Hmm.
pre-built, and then the this app itself is pretty much structured how it should be out of the box. And then I did specify several custom uh, tables, such as the asset type and then the assets and the locations.
Hmm.
Um, but it, the way that the interface to actually create all of the tables in the Dataverse is just it's a configuration based UI, and so
Right.
it's really easy to do. And so when you need to, if you needed to add a field that you track that you just thought up of, you could
Hmm.
actually just easily do that within just a minute. And so
Oh wow.
having
Yeah.
accessing those, those new data points, uh, and not saying, okay, let me write this on a post-it note and I'll come back to it later. You can actually just kind of real time interact with your system if you need to.
Yeah, and one thing that I know many of you maybe have seen this, and I showed there was an overlap between M365 and the Dynamics Cloud. One of the reasons I did that is because there are certain aspects of this Power Apps and Power Automate, and specifically Power Apps, right, that exist a little bit in the Dynamics Cloud and a little bit in the M365 Cloud. And so the example there is, a lot of people are familiar with Power Apps because M365 uses them to like customize SharePoint data entry forms, right? And we can create what are called Canvas apps, which have got data sources, and I create a form, and I can tie that form to that data source, and I can very quickly and easily build simple data entry forms. This is not a simple data entry form, right, Mark? Because this is not a Canvas app, is it?
No, this what I've built here is a model driven app, and
Mm-hmm.
it if you're using this in a web browser on on a laptop or a tablet, or if you're using it on a phone, it'll automatically resize
Mm-hmm.
all of the components, and you can actually embed Canvas apps into this model driven app as well if you needed a data entry like that.
Yeah,
So
let me pull this tab out, and if I make this small, you'll notice exactly what you just said, right? It's reformatted this automatically based on how big this
that
is,
the actual
and it's going
screen
to
is.
exactly it's responsive design, which is really cool because if you think about if we'd had to do this development in a traditional ASPX model, right? And develop this in that kind of traditional model of .NET development, right? It would have taken us that'd be a long time to get all of that stuff put together, right? And it didn't take you a long time to put all this stuff together, did it?
Oh, and so that part of it where
Hmm.
it's being responsive and automatically sizing depending on the actual screen size available,
Hmm.
that's just that comes with Power Apps. That comes with
Yeah, that's
Dynamics. That's just how
yeah,
it
that's
is. And
awesome.
so, yeah.
Yeah,
And so it saves on the development time where someone says, oh, "Okay, that functionality that we've just developed, that's perfect. Now I need to be able to use it on a phone." And then they said, "Okay, well, let's create a new project so that we can redesign all the forms so that they'll work on a form on a
yep,
phone." Nope. That's something of the past. Now you just open it up on the phone and it'll resize appropriately.
yeah. That's I mean that I think that's and honestly, if you think about it, especially when you're talking about something that's running 24/7 and is people are moving around a lot, and they aren't sitting at a desk, right? That ability to do this on your phone, to be able to be mobile and still get things done, that's really important. And to tie back to our three clouds again, right? Once again, that's part of what EMS and the Azure space provides to us with that mobile device management, mobile application management through Microsoft Intune. So that those abilities to enforce that the person who's coming in actually is who they say they are, and is authorized to use those apps can all be done. And so we know that we can, even though we're mobile, we can still be secure, even in a BYOD environment as well.
Mhm.
So that's pretty cool. I like that, Mark. So the idea here is, from this standpoint, and I'm going to go back over here to my, actually, I'm going to go to my planner, right? And I know that, actually, before I go to my planner, I'm going to go one other place, sorry. I'm going to go to SharePoint, right? Which is part of this team, the COVID Shot Clinic team, right? Is I've actually got a homepage. I've got a SharePoint site behind the scenes, and you can see I've got a series of clinics that are scheduled. And Pierre, sorry, I would say that right. Pierre is going to be for tomorrow. And when I go up here and look at my planner, right, I can say, all right, we've got our location in place, right? And when I'm done with it, I can go ahead and click that I'm finished, right? And you'll notice the task goes away. It's now in my completed zone, right? And one of the cool things about this entire process is I've actually got this ability to go out here and say, well, for the Peer Shot Clinic, right? How many tasks do I have? What's late? What's completed? What's in progress? I can even come down here and see who it's assigned to, right? If I want to, I can go ahead and clear my filter so I can see everybody's tasks, right? For all of the shot clinics that I've got, okay? And I can see by my different buckets what I've got out there and where they exist, which is really powerful, okay? So back into here, I've cleared that, but no, I've noticed that, hey, if I'm going to have a shot clinic tomorrow, I need to make sure that I got all of these injection supplies delivered to Peer for this particular thing. So to do that, I can go back over here to this asset management system, right? And I can go ahead and say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and enter in some new assets, and I'm going to call this injection supplies, okay? And my description is swabs, sharps, bandages for vaccinations, right? And I can come down here and say, what is the asset type? And I'm going to say it's a pharmaceutical, right? And I'm going to go ahead and put into here, its location is going to be Pierre. And let's see, where's my quantity on there? Where do I put the quantity in?
Oh, just put it in the brief description for right now.
Oh, in the brief description? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let me do this. Let me put that, I'll put that down in the description. And then in the brief description, I'll put down 500, actually 5,000. Okay. And I'll go ahead and save and close. Now, what's happened, I didn't put the date in, sorry, got to have a date. And I'll say that I acquired this stuff today, okay? And I can go ahead and save and close. And so we've now entered that information into the system, okay? And so that's happening from the inventory management system. And by the way, those people who are working on that may or may not be members of my actual team over here, right? And if you'll notice, when I pop back over here, I've gotten another post down here that says the injection supplies have been entered the system for Peer, and we got 5,000 of them, right? And so what that's telling me is that lets me know, because I see that showing up inside my team. I may not have a license to go into Dynamics to go look at that stuff, right? Or even into that particular model-driven app. But because this is built this way, we can let people know what's going on. And remember, this is also getting that whole communication and collaboration thing. We are using some automation to handle the communication. And that means now that somebody can go, aha, I can go back over here and say, we've got that cleared. And because I've got that cleared, then I know now this thing has been taken care of for me. Okay. And I've got my injection supplies taken care of, and I don't have to worry about it anymore. Okay. So all of that is designed to kind of roll up together and provide for us an ability to go ahead and have all of these sites pulled together, the three clouds, right? If you think about this, if it wasn't for Azure, this wouldn't have worked, okay? Dynamics is giving us the ability to go ahead and create an easy inventory management system, right? Because we've got pre-built entities, we've got Power Apps, we've got Power Automate, we've got that ability to go ahead and build these model-driven apps. And then what we're getting from and also, of course, obviously these wonderful reports that we're getting, so we can actually see what's happening, right? But then M365 is giving us that communicative capability, that collaborative capability, that ability to track work that's kind of at an ad hoc basis through this process. And all of that works together very, very quickly. All right, so let me pop back to our slide presentation real quickly, and I'm hoping I'm pulling up the right one. I keep clicking on the wrong one. I have two slide decks with the exact same name, and so I keep clicking on the wrong one. Make sure this is the right one here. Hang on a second as it goes up and loads. Yep, this is the right one. So that leads us to the end of our presentation. So what I want to do here at this point is just kind of make sure that if you have any questions, you can start putting them into our Q&A area, and we'll start answering those in just a second. Okay. In addition, we've also, I want to make sure that you guys recognize, remember, we've got a survey. I'll show you that QR code in a second. Every time you enter the survey, you have another chance to win one of two $75 Amazon gift cards. And then we've got our next session on, which is going to start in about 15 minutes or so. That is going to be about presenting your data to support your business case. And so you'll want to stay here for that particular session as well. And looking at this going forward, if the things that we've shown you about how to build these 3 cloud applications and how we can actually quickly build sessions is interesting to you, contact us about setting up one of these innovation workshops, because the purpose of these is to help you identify what are some of your business challenges and help you prioritize some of those outcomes and give you guys an executive summary and a solution brief to help you figure out, well, what's the best way I can utilize these clouds to go ahead and solve the problems that I need that are out there. So make sure you see that on there, and there's a link that Nancy just posted in the chat, so you can go ahead and see that. And here is our survey link as well. And so I want to thank you for showing up at this particular presentation. And I really appreciate you guys listening to us here. Please fill out the survey. Let us know how we did. And we do value your feedback. And then any questions that you guys have got about the demo that we put together, or the 3 clouds, or anything that we covered in this particular section. And Mark, if I've talked too much and I've missed something, please feel free to jump in and add anything.
No, that was perfect. You're just running itself right there. Yeah, I saw there was only one question, and it was the BYOD, and so I just clarified it in the chat that it was bring your own device.
Oh, sorry. Yes, BYOD. Bring your own device. Yes, as opposed to corporate issued devices. That's the usual way we look at it. And that's one of the things that I really like about it, is that I've got my Surface Duo phone, right? And what's cool is I can get to all this stuff on my phone, whether it's that phone or I had a Galaxy Note 10 before. So and so it says, next question is, are the pre-built assets reports available in Dynamics or M365? Well, the answer is kind of yes, to an extent, right? But it's really Dataverse, okay? M365 has got some of these things pre-built, like, for example, that team that I showed you guys, right? That is an out-of-the-box team template, okay? So that's pre-built for you. Okay, but a lot of the stuff that we showed in that inventory management system, Mark, you got all that stuff out of Dynamics, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that was Dynamics or Power Platform. Yeah, the configuration for those charts and the dashboards that we were just looking at, those are pretty simple. I guess the complicated part is making sure that you have the right information. And so once you have the correct information, you can run amazing charts and graphics to pull, pieces of information out. But those were built in Dynamics.
Now, are those charts that you had in there? Are those are just components that are inside the model-driven apps? Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so you're not having to build like a Power BI report and bring those across.
No, you can do that for even more complexity. But the ones that we were showing were the ones that you use with the actual configurator in Power Platform / Dynamics.
Okay. So Christine just asked the question, could you build another model-driven app associated with some main data, but with totally different focus for different users? And my answer to that
Definitely.
would be yeah. I mean that's
Yes.
really, now you could do that a couple of different ways, right? You could build one model-driven app with different views, like that had the one that we were showing before had an administration view and had an administration dashboard and like an asset dashboard, right? So it could be different views inside the same application, or it could be totally different applications, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like if you, for instance, you're using Sales Hub, which is generally a sales centric um, app for Dynamics. If you were to create your own inventory management system within your existing organization, where you created like an asset table and different properties, et cetera, like that, you could create your own Power App that actually just looks at those particular tables, and doesn't have anything to do with like opportunities or leads. That's right.
Hmm. Okay, that's a great question, Christine. Thank you.
Certainly. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that's one of the things that's more powerful about Dynamics and Power Platform that didn't used to exist in prior versions to moving to the 365, where you can actually do things like that. Because before you would have to, based off of some sort of security role or something, you try to reskin the site map and then try to hide and show things. You can actually just build separate apps that just look at the different tables.
Now, is there security built into the Dataverse already, Mark? So if people have
Oh yeah.
rights to see, now is it at a table level, or is it inside the table or at a row level?
So it depends. It
Okay.
can be at the table level. And that's one of the other things that's really amazing about Power Platform and Dynamics
Hmm.
is just the security model that you used to have to try to build from the ground up. That's already built into Dynamics or Power Platform, and it's I'd say its security is based off of the level of the table versus in conjunction with like the intersection of a hierarchy of business units. And
Sure.
so there's a lot of really cool ways that you can actually do security,
Mhm.
to make sure that people are only seeing the things that they need to see.
Yeah, and so and I think that's where I'm getting to, which is one things we can do in SharePoint, right? Is we can actually set up a document library or a list that people have rights at the individual item level. So somebody can go in there and see it, and you could see different files than I see because we have permissions, right? And the fact that we can do that in Dataverse as well, that's even more powerful because now you can do the same thing inside your model-driven apps, which is really pretty cool.
Yeah, and so to elaborate further on what you're saying, so those dashboards that you're looking at, because you're a system administrator and so am I, we're seeing the same thing. But if
Mm.
we actually had that configured with slightly different security, where someone could maybe see only things like within their own city or their own region or something like that, their own
Hmm.
division,
Hmm.
the the charts that display for me would be completely different because every
Yeah.
query that I run, every search that I do, the security is just automatically applied to it. And so that's also with all of those charts because those are real-time charts. And so it's running a query before it builds
You
to
see,
the
and
division.
I think about
Yeah.
trying to do that at the SQL level, right?
Oh
As
man.
an as
Yeah.
as, as an old application developer,
Yeah.
I remember having to write applications where you were trying to, you never actually enforced it in SQL, you enforced it at the application level. And now what happens is when you're writing your display screens, you're having to put that kind of code inside of there. And the fact that's just built into the model-driven apps and the Power Platform, that's just absolutely amazing. I love that. Yeah, that's cool. I don't see any other questions that are over there.
I don't either.
Yeah. Well, I hope that everybody enjoyed this particular session and enjoyed the demo that we put together. We certainly enjoyed working on it. Mark and I did.
Oh yeah.
I know it was an awful lot of fun to put this kind of thing together and think through the process of what this would look like. And it's neat how all this comes in there. Christina's brain is percolating. Awesome. Well, once again, you have my contact information. You can reach me on Twitter at dbrusa. You can email me dbrusa@catapultsystems.com. Feel free to reach out if you've got questions that have popped up afterwards. Happy to if I don't know the answer, I'll direct you in the right location, in the right direction. Okay.